Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are excited that so many of you could join us today for our conversation on the Wheel of Consent. I'm Pele Shalev, the Public Events Specialist for the Public Programs Department of the California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. We may be joining from different places all over the world, and as a representative of CIIS, I want to start off by expressing our debt and gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original peoples and continual caretakers of the San Francisco Peninsula. CIIS campus is located on the traditional unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, which they call Yelamu. In the Ramaytush Ohlone language, Yelamu identifies both the people and the territory. This acknowledgement is only a single, small step towards being in deeper connection and relationship with Indigenous tribes and organizations in our community, and does not begin to acknowledge all the native lands, languages, and territories where you are right now, or where you live and work every day. I invite you to take a moment now to acknowledge the land where you reside, and to commit to learn more about the native communities near you, and to support their work. If it feels right for you to share in the chat, please do. We always recommend native-land.ca as a starting resource. Before we start, I want to go over a few general tips and troubleshooting items. We will have a Q&A after the conversation tonight. Please submit your questions at any time using our anonymous web form, which is linked in the event description below this video. We will pull questions from that form after the event, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. We do have automatically generated captions for this event, which you can toggle on and off using the closed captioning button in YouTube. Chat will be enabled during this event, but please note that it is not being moderated, and our presenters cannot see the chat. Chat is not required to fully experience the event. If you choose to participate in chat, please be respectful and avoid language that could be offensive or insensitive to others. You can turn the chat off at any time, and we encourage you to do so if you find that it is negatively impacting your experience in any way. If you're having issues with your audio or video, we always suggest that you start by refreshing the page. And then if you still have issues, we suggest that you adjust your video settings within YouTube. Now, let me first introduce our presenters, Dr. Roger Kuhn and Dr. Betty Martin, and we'll get right to the conversation. Dr. Roger Kuhn is a Porch Creek Two-Spirit Indigiqueer somacultural sex therapist, sexuality educator, writer, activist, and musician. Roger's work explores the concepts of decolonizing and unsettling sexuality and focuses on the way culture impacts and informs our bodily experiences. He is a community organizer of the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit Powwow and a board member of the Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ+ Center for Equity. His first book, Somacultural Liberation, is available in both paperback and audio, and his music can be streamed on all digital platforms. Dr. Betty Martin has had her hands on people professionally for over 40 years, first as a chiropractor, and upon retiring from that practice, as a certified surrogate partner, sacred intimate, and somatic sex educator. Her explorations in somatic-based therapy and practices informed her creation of the framework, the Wheel of Consent. And now, let me turn it over to Betty and Roger.
Istanko Hesje Lajadoga Muskoki Hokodogame Anathkabahuitla. Greetings and welcome. My name is Dr. Roger Kuhn. I come from the Porch Creek Nation. Some folks just call me Raj, and Betty, please feel free just to call me Raj tonight. It is such an absolute pleasure to be with you here tonight.
Thank you.
When I think of Betty Martin, I think of the word pleasure. I just want to let the audience know right out there. When I think of Betty Martin, I think of pleasure. And I have had this sensation of pleasure in my body all day today, knowing that this conversation was going to happen. So thank you. Thank you so much for just the invitation for tonight, to be in community with you, and really to share the gift of your work with the CIIS audience. And thank you, everybody at CIIS, for that fabulous introduction. And is there anything that you want to say to the audience tonight before we get started?
No.
Okay. Lots of stuff will come up. So
lots of stuff will come up.
just to give everybody a heads up, I do know Betty. I've known Betty for a few years now. I had the pleasure of, and you're going to hear that word pleasure a lot tonight. I had the pleasure
I'm
of
liking
being,
it already.
I had the pleasure of being in conversation with a group of practitioners a couple of years ago, and I didn't know who was going to be there beforehand. All of a sudden, Betty Martin pops up on the screen, and I was a little bit starstruck. I was like, oh my goodness, here's this person whose work I so admire, and now I am teaching this person. And then a few years later, I had an opportunity to actually work with you, and we've kept in contact ever since then. So it is a real joy. I want to start off really asking you about the wheel of consent. Many of our audience members tonight may have never heard of the wheel. And I know, as someone that is learning how to facilitate the wheel of consent, we have to do our elevator pitch. So I thought I'm going to ask the originator for maybe the original, or maybe it's changed a little over the years. What is your elevator pitch, Betty, when you're discussing the wheel of consent with folks who may have never heard of it before?
That's a great question. My elevator pitch. Well, when you're touching someone, are you doing what they want, or are you doing what you want? And what's the difference, and why does it matter? And that's basically what the wheel of consent is about.
Yeah. What's the difference, and why does it matter?
Yeah. And why do we need to know how to do both? Yeah. Yeah.
And where would you let folks know, like, you got inspired by this in some particular way? Where did it come from?
It came from, well, I was on a personal journey in my own erotic awakening in my mid-40s. And I went to a bunch of workshops mostly with the Body Electric School. And at one of them, we played a game called the 3-minute game. And the 3-minute game is a game for 2 people. And you take turns asking each other these 2 questions. One question is, what do you want me to do to you for 3 minutes? I can think of some fun things I might like you to do to me for 3 minutes. Thank you. And the other question is, what do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? It's a very different question, creates kind of the opposite dynamic. But likewise, I can think of some fun things I might want to do to you for 3 minutes. And so when we first played that in the workshop, it was immediately obvious that we're taking turns. And that the 4 dynamics that are created are different. And in two of those rounds, I'm doing, and in 2 of those rounds, I'm done to. That's one way to differentiate. And in 2 of those rounds, they're for me, and 2 of those rounds, they're for you. But they're not the same ones as the doing and done to. So you end up with 4 rounds, which you can chart in a matrix. I'm doing to you what I want, or I'm doing to you what you want. And that's the experience of that's going to be quite different. And you are doing to me what you want, and you are doing to me what I want. So the who wants it, who's it for, and the who's doing overlap in that way. And I learned this in the workshop. It was a lot of fun. I kind of put it on the shelf in the closet, gathering dust. And then when I started seeing clients, I took it out, dusted it off, and I thought, well, okay, if I'm talking with a client and getting the history and the talking, all that stuff, and then we need a way to transition into the touching part of the session. I thought, oh, this will be a good way to sort of get started and see how comfortable they are and stuff. And it did show me that, and showed me a lot more. And it showed me, as I kept doing it with clients, it showed me, oh, this is where everyone gets stuck. Oh, this is where people get lost. Oh, this is where people have no idea what they want. Or this is where people get confused about who it's for. Or this is where people have trouble saying no or communicating any of that. So as I just kept playing with it with more and more clients, excuse me, I noticed that, oh, this shows a lot about what's going on for a person. And eventually I came to see that whatever stuff you have about relationship, it's going to show up here in one of those quadrants or the other. And then I got pretty obsessed with it and just kept diving in and just noticing more and more. But it came from that 3-minute game. What do you want me to do to you? What do you want to do to me? Simple questions, but it seems no one's really asking that.
Simple questions with potentially very profound results.
Yeah.
Not just in the touch, though, in the way someone may feel, asking for what they want, and also telling someone no. I don't want to do that, right? Exactly. So I just want to point out for our listeners tonight, those that are here with us live and those that will be listening to this recording afterward, bettymartin.org is a valuable resource where you can actually find a lot of downloads, including that matrix wheel chart you were talking about. There's also phenomenal videos, and there's even a flyer that you can download that explains more about the 3-minute game. These are all available for free on Betty's website, bettymartin.org. And also, let's quickly plug your book for a moment, The Art of Giving and Receiving.
The Art of Receiving and Giving.
Sorry, The Art of Receiving and Giving. Is that The Art of Receiving and Giving? The Art of Receiving and Giving. Thank you for the gentle correction. The Art of Receiving and Giving by Betty Martin, and then it was co-authored by Robin. Yeah, wonderful. And there was a QR code floating around where if folks wanted to order that book, CIIS has a great relationship with a independent Black-owned bookstore that we're putting sales of the book through that, so folks can find that, and or please visit bettymartin.org for more information.
Thank you.
I want to just point out the quadrants for those that don't know. Those quadrants are the serve, take, accept, and allow quadrants. And one of the things that I've been really interested in is how did you even come up with those names? I get the what do you want to do? Like serve, take. How did those names come about?
Oh, that's a good question, because it's well, back up just a moment. It's part of the elevator speech. The wheel of consent is a practice in taking apart receiving and giving. So it's either all about me, what I want, and within your limits, of course, or it's all about you and what you want, again, within my limits. And so you're doing them only one at a time. You're either receiving a gift or you're giving a gift, and you're not trying to do them both at once. So it's helpful to see it as a practice, because you don't want to live your whole life trying to figure out who everything is for. Because we're not always in that situation of giving or receiving a gift. But having a practice in which you do that teaches you a lot about yourself, gives you some experiences that will happen no other way. And so it took me some years to figure out that, oh, this is a practice. It doesn't replace everything that you're already doing. And so what was your question again?
The question is about how did you name serve, take, accept, allow?
So what I noticed was what most people would call give and receive. For example, I'm giving you a massage. I'm touching you. It's for your benefit. I'm doing it the way you want. Most people would call that dynamic give and receive. But if I'm touching you for my enjoyment, and you're giving me the gift of access to you, to your body, or whatever part of your body we've agreed on, then I'm doing, but it's for me, you're giving the gift. So that's a form of receiving a gift also. But so I couldn't call them receive and give, because receive and give is a much bigger thing than who is doing. And so I needed some different words. And serve was pretty obvious, because when I'm serving, I'm doing what you want. And take is kind of a difficult word for a lot of people, because when I say the word take, what you hear is steal.
Yes.
And that's not the case. It's when I'm taking, I'm receiving a gift that you're giving me. And actually this idea of take came from a childhood memory of Thanksgiving at my parents' house. And there was always a, pecan pie and stuff. And typically there'd be some left over. So my mom would say, y'all take that home with you now, And so taking meant you pick up something and you walk out, So it implies that, or it describes a situation in which I'm receiving a gift, but I have to reach out and pick it up. It's not just put in my hand. Another example would be, I have pears in the tree in my yard. I can pick them and bring them over to you in a basket, or I can say, come on over and pick the pears anytime. It's still a gift, but in the second situation, you are taking action to collect the gift. So it's a different dynamic. So that's where the name take came from. And it's unfortunate that it has negative connotation sometimes, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I could not find another word for it. It was just like I couldn't find another word. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I have noticed in my clinical work, as I've introduced the 3-minute game into my clinical practice with couples and with individuals who may be in multi-partner configurations and or looking for partnership, etc., is when then the wheel is introduced, and particularly that quadrant, there is this like, this brace of like, take, I don't want to take, because it's so loaded for so many folks. And that brings us to an aspect of the wheel that I'm very interested in from a maybe looking at from like as a social scientist, that realm of all the things that take may be associated with that are actually outside of the realm of consent, like stealing, for example, right? Like land theft, like so many other things that we can name in that process. And I do want to get to that. We're going to get to that later on in our conversation. Though there was something you said a moment ago that I wanted to ask you too. I actually have written that down as a question. You talked about limits a moment ago, and I've also heard you talk about the difference between boundaries and limits. And that is a word, those words I think are oftentimes interchanged in our language.
Oh, sure.
Though when I heard you in one of your I think it was in the Like a Pro workshop, you really gave a relatively clear differentiation between boundaries and limitations. And I'm hoping that you'll share that with us tonight. Your perspective around the difference between a boundary versus a limitation, in particular as it maybe relates to the wheel of consent, and maybe then how we apply that in our day-to-day lived experiences.
Yeah. Well, first I distinguish between a limit and a limitation. Because the boundary is a word that's used in a lot of different ways. And it might mean something you don't want to do. It might mean something that you own. It might mean, something that you're opposed to or something like that. And chances are, if you're arguing with somebody about boundaries, you're probably using two different meanings of the word because it means so many different things, or it gets used to mean different things. And so the way I use it, and you don't have to use it this way, but I had to make some distinction. The way I use it is a boundary is the perimeter of what's mine. Things that I'm responsible for and have a right to, I think of as my domain. And I learned this from a friend who had a wolf sanctuary, that the wolves, she had several families of them. They could see each other through the chain link fence, but they were perfectly peaceful with each other because they knew what they were responsible for and what they had a right to was in this piece of dirt that they're on. And so I started thinking of that in terms of boundaries, of like, wait a minute, what is it that I have a right to and that I'm responsible for? And I think in general, I'd say my body, my thoughts, my feelings, my desires, my fears, all that stuff. And so I think of boundary as the perimeter, the fence around my piece of dirt. And I think of limits as something that I'm not willing to do or not willing to participate in. Well, the perimeter of my domain, that doesn't change. Those things are I'm always responsible for them. But what I'm willing to do changes all the time. Of course it does, as it should.
Yes.
So I think the important thing to notice about the difference between those two, and you can use them in any way. My friend Marsha Baczynski uses them the opposite way I do. That doesn't matter. What matters is noticing that there are some things that I'm always responsible for, that doesn't change. And there are other things that change all the time. And they should change depending on the situation, the day, the person, and so that's how I use those words. And yeah, it's just a way to distinguish and recognize the fact that some things are going to change. Well, so if you're arguing, well, boundaries don't change. Oh, boundaries do change. It's probably because you're using the word boundaries and these two different things.
That's why, I think operational definitions sometimes can be incredibly useful. And I want to ask you really about let's define consent, right? And before I get your answer, folks at home that are listening, if you have questions for Betty, please feel free to drop them in the chat field, and they will get them to us. And we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A after our chat together tonight. So please feel free to post your questions. So yeah, let's talk about how are you defining the word consent?
That's a great question. I have been teaching this stuff for 15 years or so. And a couple of years ago, I thought, I should look this up in the dictionary. So I did. And I was a little surprised, but as I reflect on it, I'm not surprised at all, because consent in the dictionary basically means saying yes. So I say yes to something that you want to do, or and this is where giving consent, the expression giving consent or getting consent comes from. If I want something from you, I have to get your consent. I have to get a yes out of you somehow. And that's an important dynamic, but it is not the only one.
Yeah. And
it's very incomplete. It's a fine place to start, but it's not going to lead you to very much fun. And so, and the other thing I think that gets, it kind of shows up in the public discourse about consent is this idea of the gatekeeper model, which is, I'm holding the gate. If you want in, I can either open it or close it. And so I have the goodies. You want the goodies, you have to get me to open the gate.
Yeah.
And if you hear somebody say get consent or give consent, chances are you're in that sort of gatekeeper mindset. And I'm using consent in a much broader sense, as are many people, in a much broader sense of, let's find out what sounds fun together and figure out how to do that. That's a very different question and a very different process of arriving at that. And that's how I think of consent. Really, the wheel of consent should be called the wheel of agreement, but it's too late. So, yeah. So technically, consent means getting a yes.
Yeah, and sometimes,
and there's more to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've been really playing around with the idea myself around how do people feel their yes? How do you know? How do you really know what your yes is? And sometimes we know what our yes is by knowing our no.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I'm really intrigued by. From a somatic perspective, I'm a somatic psychotherapist in addition to being a sex therapist, and so the body is so incredibly important to me. And I know from personal experience that listening to my body really is where those answers lie. And so many folks, I'm sure you've had your experiences yourself that don't know how to feel into the body.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any advice you can give to someone to even like, how do they know their no so they can get to their yes?
Oh boy. You go to a somatic psychotherapist.
RogerJKuhn.com, folks.
Yeah. It's that's a great question because it's not like most of us are taught to really trust our bodies,
Right.
because yeah, I mean, yeah, seems like for most of us, our upbringing is don't trust your body and do what I say instead, and sit in the desk in the school all day and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in our modern culture are pretty cut off from knowing themselves very well somatically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, in the 3-minute game, it's built in a little bit in that you're slowing way down and you're taking a pause to notice and so forth. But there's a lot more that people can experiment with breathing and breath work, and there's a whole body of work around that. There's movement, authentic movement, contact improv, all kinds of ways to explore. Oh, wait, when I change my posture, it changes how I feel. And there's exercises like noticing your fingers and, where's the blood going. And there's just lots of ways therapeutically that people explore that and play with it, both in session and in workshops. And I guess I kind of learned through going to lots of workshops and things. Also, growing up as a hippie helped.
Well,
lots of hot springs.
Well, that'll do it.
Yeah.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking around how many of us that grow up and when I talk about the culture, I'm really specifically speaking of those of us that grew up or have lived for a long time in the USA, that access to our bodies oftentimes doesn't feel like our own. Even in my own experience, thinking that, oh my gosh, when I'm 18, I have to register for the draft, which means that at any time my body now belongs to someone else. And that stayed, it was a fear of mine my entire childhood through my adolescence of just like, I don't want to turn 18. I don't want to lose the autonomy, what little autonomy I have of my body. And that's something almost like how I really began to get really curious about feelings in my body, because having been born in the body that I was born in, race and ethnicity aside, having been born with a penis has given me a ton of privilege in the world, right? It's given me so much privilege, so much I don't even realize half the time how much privilege I have just because of how I was born. Though there was that piece then that like, oh, because I was born this way, that means I might have to go to war and I might have to kill someone. And it's so outside of what I would deem like I'm consenting to. Like, I don't want to do that. And there's a way that I know that I shut my body down, and only through sexual expression did I actually feel that I could reclaim some of my autonomy with my own body in that particular way. Though it took a lot of sometimes deprogramming that my body was owed to the US government, or my body was owed to war, or some way in that way that was very, very intense for me. And I think it's a big part of how I got into the somatic world, just really healing that tightness that I felt, that hypervigilance I felt in my body for so long. And then there's that idea of when you reached out to me and said, hey, like I'm interested in doing this chat, I felt such a yes. Like it was like an immediate, like this, it just like it was like deep within the toes, swirling all through my body. It was guttural, it was pelvic, it was cerebral, it was outside in all those ways. And that to me felt like such a yeah. I knew it. There was not a doubt in my mind that yes, I wanted to be with Betty Martin in conversation in this way. And that is just one way that I understand my yes, like when it is like enthusiastic, when it's exciting. And then sometimes the yes isn't always exciting. Sometimes the yes it's really heartfelt, or it's really, there can be a lot of grief associated with the yes. Letting go is a form of yes as well. And that is that's what I find so intriguing about your work and what you've offered folks, is there's this multi-dimensional way of thinking about so much of this. And I know I was thinking back to that time that I was in person with you in Seattle, and how it was like explained to you, like, that I think of the wheel like almost like this sphere, more of a sphere, like it's this floating sphere in the world, as opposed to this, circle on a paper. Because it's just, you can move in all of these different ways, hang out in all of these different locations, up, down, diagonal. And there's something really profound about that for me. And that leads me to really wanting to talk a little bit about understanding your modality. And I really wanted to know any advice that you had for the listeners that are out there tonight who also have an idea and or a modality. How do you bring this out into the world? How do you take something that is original and or built off of, like the 3-minute game, or built off in something, and say, I'm going to now start sharing this with folks? I'm just curious, like, what that process was like for you. How did you trust yourself and trust the work enough to start to offer this?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I started small. I started talking to a few friends who were like, oh yeah, well, Betty's got something, and I started giving a few little short evening workshops to kind of explore teaching it. I went to a couple of sex educator conferences and presented for an hour or two, and what surprised me was that people found it really useful. Like, I mean, I thought it was kind of cool, but it was just sort of this glitch of my engineering brain to draw this, I thought it was kind of cool, but it turned out that it was really useful for people, and light bulbs would go off. And that was encouraging to me, because, oh, it makes sense. I'll present a little more. And so I think I initially offered a workshop for sex workers, because I was doing sex work at the time, in 07, maybe, something like that. And, half a dozen, 8 or 10 people or something. And the Wheel of Consent was like 2 hours on Saturday afternoon. It was like Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. And the Wheel of Consent was this little thing, because I thought, oh, I'll just draw it out and it'll be obvious. It wasn't obvious. And gradually, the Wheel of Consent part of the workshop grew and grew. And then the workshop became 3 days, and then became 4 days. And now it's 5 days. I don't think we're going to get any bigger. 5 days. And the Wheel of Consent is the whole thing. So it was gradual. And the other thing that was really helpful was seeing where people got confused or lost or had questions. Because the way my mind works is that I love to have questions like that, and it helps me to hone what it is that I'm actually trying to say. And whereas if it was just me standing up in front of the class, whatever, but seeing where people got confused or lost helped me hone, what is it that I'm actually trying to say here? And so that was very helpful in honing the whole thing. Yeah.
So
And playing it with hundreds of clients and students. I think if I had not had all those clients to play it with and I just had 2 or 3 friends, I would have never noticed all this stuff. And I'm pretty confident that if anybody would take the 3-minute game and play it with 100 people, you'd probably come up with the same stuff. I mean, it was just noticing what was happening in front of me. Yeah, it wasn't really making stuff up. It was just noticing.
And noticing is a big part of the work. And choosing is a big part of the work as well.
Yeah.
So it's, talking to your community, offering workshops, possibly speaking at conferences. I know you wrote a book.
That came much later.
That came later. Doing podcasts like this, just sort of getting yourself out there is a way that you can bring these modalities out into the world.
Yeah. Podcasts are a great way these days.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable talking. Yeah.
Many of the CIIS audience is made up of either therapy students, folks who have maybe graduated through a therapy degree with a therapy degree at CIIS. And how do you envision the wheel of consent being used as what I'm going to call a therapy experiential and potentially then as a treatment modality? Whether that be like with clinicians or with counselors and or with coaches?
That's a great question. I in my somatic sex education practice, because it was experiential, I was touching people and they were touching me. And that's not the case with a lot of people, of course. But we would play the 3-minute game or a variation thereof. And it was through the experience of, okay, I'm asking, how do you want me to touch you for a few minutes right now? And they would have whatever feelings they have about it. Oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that, or you're supposed to know, or I'm embarrassed to ask, or all of blah, 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 blah. And just the asking the question is what brought it all up. And holding the space for their experience is what brought it all up. That wasn't really much to do. Just ask the question. And if I was working with a couple, I'd have them ask each other the questions and then see what came up. And working with a couple, all kinds of dynamics will come up that they didn't notice before, but boy, it'll shine a light on it. That's for sure. And so, when I was working as a surrogate partner, same thing. It was just so rich to see, what it brought up for people. And again, holding the space for them to have their experience and have their feels about whatever it was. And if you are not a touch professional, maybe you're a psychotherapist or something, what doesn't work so well is to give it as homework and send them home, because they'll be making mistakes that they don't notice. For example, one partner will say, how do you want me to touch you? And the other partner will say, well, you can such and such, I guess, which doesn't answer the question.
Yeah.
It's a very different, it's like one person said, what do you want? And the other person said, well, what do I not mind terribly much? That's a very different question. But if they don't have any experience with it, they'll think that, okay, that counts, but it doesn't. So it doesn't always work well to just give them the homework and send them home, because they won't notice those things. Whereas if it's a couple, you have them do it in front of you. If it's someone that's in
I lost my audio of you for a moment, Betty. Just 1 second. I can't hear you at the moment. I don't know if folks can, you can hear me though? This is one of those live theater moments. It says, Betty, we can hear you. Oh, there we go. I can hear you again now. Okay.
Okay.
Now it says, there we go. I hear you now, Betty.
Okay. There's a little bright colory thing going on in the corner, but it's stopped now.
You're back. You're back.
Yeah, okay. We're back. Yeah.
Great.
So anyway, if you're working in a non-touch modality, you can do the verbal parts of it with your client so that they're getting it. And even that will bring a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
When I was learning like sex therapy, right, as like the how to facilitate sex therapy, we learned a modality called sensei focus.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And at the time, you know, that was like, I remember being like, is this it? This is what we give people, folks? Because I was like thinking like there's so much that's missing here. There's all of this stuff that's not being talked about. And my clients honestly just weren't really enjoying it. It was just a lot of them thought it was kind of boring. And I felt a little sucked, like, oh gosh, that's what I know. That's what I was given.
Yeah, right.
And it was actually a conversation I was having with someone else that you know, sort of casually mentioned like the 3-minute game and the wheel of consent. And I was like, well, what's that? And then it was like, oh, you know, wow, like this is amazing. And so I have really felt almost like with a lot of the privilege that I have to be able to teach a lot of sex therapists in different like certification programs, including at CIIS, and different schools across the US, to be able to introduce them to this just as like a concept for the first time. And every single time I have done this, I can see everybody's eyes just going like, wow, this is phenomenal. And I remember it was actually at CIIS, there was I was doing a just a demo on the wheel of consent in the 3-minute game, and one of the students commented afterwards that like the temperature in the room has risen because there was something that was happening between you know, and it was not sexual at all. It was you know, very but there was something about witnessing someone asking for what they wanted, me saying yes and or saying no, and the collaboration that comes from that, of people really figuring out what do I really want?
What do I really want?
And that question too of like, you know, will you massage my shoulders for 3 minutes? It's like, well, I need to know more about the kind of touch that you're really wanting. Like, do you want me to do one of these choppy things, or do you want the kneading, or what is it? And really helping people understand that they can ask for all kinds of things within that ask. It's really a beautiful process. I'm mindful of our time. I know we've got a few more minutes together. So folks, again, if you've got questions for Betty or for myself, please feel drop them in the chat and we will get to them in just a few moments. I wanted to talk to you now for a moment around like, where do you see the wheel evolving? Let's say if we're looking in 5 to 10 years from now, where would you like to see someone like myself? I know you know a little bit of my interests in the world and what my work is around. Where would you see that I might be able to take this work into the communities that I work with, or the communities that I might represent? And what are your feelings about that?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay, y'all heard that.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great question, because it developed out of a somatic sex education practice, and in the context of relationship and between peers, and you know, the personal thing. But the truth is, I hate to say it, I don't really care about your sex life. Like, this is is it a tool that will improve and broaden your sex life? Oh yeah. And is that all there is to it? Oh no. And when people learn with us, I give them permission to take it, add it to what you're doing, develop it, you know, because I don't know where it's going to go. And your work, the work of a number of other of our students who are taking it more directly into a liberation context. I just love hearing about that work. And I think it's inherently liberating because it's teaching you how to notice yourself, notice what you want, and say no and all. It's teaching you that you have a choice about what happens to you. And that changes everything. That changes everything.
Yeah.
And so it's inherently liberating. And it can also be taken into kind of a more direct approach to personal liberation and social liberation.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about that. And I have no idea how to do that. And so people are doing it. Yeah.
So
yeah.
would it be safe to say then that this is sort of your pecan pie moment, and you can say, take the wheel,
Take the
as
wheel.
you
Yes.
will, and
Take it.
bring it out into the world. It's the pecan pie or pecan pie. I know that
Yeah.
that's controversial
Yeah.
depending on what part of the world
Yeah.
you're from. I say pecan myself, but
Yeah.
so getting into that, like there's a way I want to talk to you about the challenges of with getting into the wheel, getting into the wheel of consent, which, and by that I mean, you know, we live in a world where historically consent has been violated, and now is
hell yes.
sometimes weaponized. And when people, it's weaponized when people feel uncomfortable with unsettling truths. And so I'm wondering your perspectives on what do you believe we can.
What do you mean consent has been weaponized?
Meaning, let's say, for example, things that are happening around book bans. Folks that say, I don't want to learn about that, or I never agreed to learning about that. I never agreed to talking about that.
Okay.
Sometimes some, you know, what I call unsettling truths. Unsettling is a term that I use to really talk about, you know, a decolonial and unsettling process. Unsettlers are oftentimes folks whose families settled in the United States, as opposed to those of us, you know, whose families were here. So like it's these uncomfortable and these unsettling truths that, you know, when we bring up things like the genocide of the indigenous population or the enslavement of African people, I don't want to hear about that. Or when we talk about different kinds of bodies, different orientations, different types of gender presentations, I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to see that. So it's like this way that they're using, they're weaponizing consent to say, like, I didn't consent to that. I didn't consent to hearing about that.
Yeah.
So what do you believe we as a society and facilitators of this work can do to move forward these conversations and necessary changes, and using the wheel as one of those tools?
Yeah. Well, first, I think that it's not consent that's being weaponized, it's the word.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
It's the word.
It's the word. Yes.
Yes, I didn't consent to that. It's just a way of saying, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn about that. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to hear about that. And of course, there are going to be people who don't want to hear about things. And of course, there's different things that we all don't want to hear about.
Sure.
I mean, I have my things that I want to hear about, and you have your things you don't want to hear about, you know. So I think what's happening there is the use of the word. Yeah.
So it's really important sometimes to name that word, you know, sort of like boundaries and limitations, sort of like we're using these words in a way that maybe we're using it differently, right? And to sort of recognize that it's not consent itself that's weaponized. It's you know, that the word, or you know, it's almost sometimes like, it's like, well, y'all didn't even know what that word meant, you know, a month ago, and now you're using it in a way that's actually not correct. Though I think that's, you know, that's the piece of this work.
And it can also just sorry, I can also, if I don't want to hear about that, I can insert the word consent in the sentence, because that makes me sound righteous.
Yes.
And I know that word consent means something to you, so I'm going to bring it up and throw it in your.
That's right.
That's right. I think that strikes me as the weaponizing.
That's exactly
part.
what I meant by that, right? That it's this understanding. So oftentimes we're unable to have the conversation about the realms outside of the wheel of consent
Mhm.
because folks are unwilling to do so. Even folks that may be doing this work, or maybe are facilitators, or maybe students of this work, because we haven't learned as a culture how to, or as a community of people, to really have those really unsettling conversations. And sometimes that's where like knowing your no is really tricky, because it can feel like a no, like I don't want to talk about this, and yet there's a reason why we're here. We're sitting here together, not necessarily just you and I, though. We're here around this idea of liberation, of getting to our yes through pleasure, through touch, through connection. And for some folks, it's really hard to even get into that take quadrant to begin with.
Yeah, well,
because
sure.
of all those things, that the legacies that they're bringing with them on top of that. And, you know, I did not necessarily expect you to have an answer tonight, because I don't have one either.
Good.
You know, it was just like, I wanted to name that as like, as a student of this work, to say that I get the wheel of consent. It makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. It's probably the clearest intervention, I think, from as a therapist, as a clinician, as a sexologist, that I've ever encountered. I just want to name that and say it's really so clear to me. And then there's all of the mystery that also surrounds the wheel that you name in that diagram. If folks download bettymartin.org, find that wheel diagram to download, you name those aspects of those realms outside of the wheel. And some other time, Betty, I would really love to just have another conversation with you around the hope that we might have as a culture, as a community, as practitioners, on how we can bring this work in a much necessary, needed way to really begin healing, which is going to take a lot of knowing your no's so that you can get to your yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I say yes to that.
And then there's one other thing that I wanted to get to before they're about to tell us that it's time for the Q&A, which is oh gosh, you know, we're a week away from some of our lives really just either being celebratory or uprooted, or, you know, I've really been thinking myself around, regardless of what happens with whomever, whatever candidate wins the US election, a lot of the issues that I deeply care about are still going to remain. There will still be a crisis of the unhoused, and Indigenous people will still have threats to their sovereignty, etc. And so, you know, there's this way of like using want and willing right now that I'm really curious about from your perspective. Like, I might not want to participate at all in what's going on right now in terms of the election. And I've always voted. And I have already voted, just everybody know, I've already voted. Though there was that part of me that was sitting with this, like, I don't want to do this. I'm willing to do it though. I am willing to vote. And that was something I learned from the wheel, want versus willing. And I really sat with my willingness to participate in this system as it currently stands at the moment, deeply hoping for some kind of change. And I just wanted to ask you to speak on want versus willing a little bit, maybe in the context of what we're experiencing right now as a nation, but then even in the entirety of the world, with all the multiple atrocities going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah, we need another couple hours.
I think so. I think so.
The want and willing, actually, it just arose just of noticing. And I'm sure it's not original. I'm sure people have thought of it, but want refers to something that I want for my own reasons. It might or might not involve anyone else. I want to take a walk. I want a sandwich. I want a nap. I want to put my hand up your shirt. I want to hug you. Might or might not involve anybody else, but it's for my own reasons. There might be something that I would not choose for my own reasons, but because you want it, I'm perfectly willing to go with what you want. I'll choose it because you want it and I care about you. And that's what I call willing. I'm not likely to drive to the airport for the fun of it.
嗯 哼
But if you want to ride, I'm perfectly willing to drive you to the airport.
嗯
So, or I might not be burning to get my hands on you at the moment, but if you want a back rub, I'll be happy to do that for you. So that's what I'm talking about, willing. And it's helpful to know the difference because it's gonna change my answer to what we do. If there's a documentary offered on the history of women race car drivers, I'm not really probably very interested. But if one of them's your daughter and you want me to see it, oh hell yeah, I'll watch that thing. So it's going to change my understanding of what it is that I'm going to do and how I'm going to participate. And yeah, it just seems really helpful to check in with myself. Wait a minute. Is this something I want? Is this something I'm willing to do? And of course, there's a range there. It may be a burning desire. It may be just a mild preference. And the same thing with willing. It may be, oh, hell yeah, that sounds great. I'll do that. Or it may be, yeah, I can make that work. Or it might be only for you, baby, and only this once, So there's a range there. But I found it helpful in checking in with myself about why I'm doing this or why I'm asking for this. Yeah.
For folks that are maybe just listening tonight, I want to reference that Betty, when you were referencing, checking in with yourself, you actually gestured toward the body, right, as a way of using somatic awareness to sort of feel into that. We just have
I've lost your sound again.
Oh, can you hear me? Testing.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
I think we're back.
But
I wanted to link that to your other question about the bigger picture of society.
Yes, please.
As a whole. And I think there are things like you were mentioning voting. I don't want to, but I'm willing to because it's of benefit to the country as a whole. It's a benefit to other people. It's a benefit to me in some way. It's not something I'm really happy with, but I'm choosing to do it because I have a reason to do it. And it's a benefit in some way. And that I think applies to a lot of things that we do. I don't really prefer to drive on the right side of the road or stop at stop signs, but hell yeah, I'm going to do it. Because that's a benefit to me and everybody else.
We have just a few moments left of our time together. I know some questions have already come in. So folks, if you do have questions, you feel free to pop them into the chat field and our hosts will make sure that those questions come to Betty and myself. So Betty, any final thoughts or comments that you may want to share before I turn it over to questions that our audience has tonight?
Well, I want to give credit to Harry Faddis, who invented the 3-minute game. It wasn't me.
Yes.
It was a Harry Faddis, and who's working with the Body Electric School at the time.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I meant to bring him up earlier. I know Harry from the music world. He used to play my music back in the day.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so actually I ran into him at a couple of years ago at Easton Mountain. Actually, I was at a retreat that Adam Nicholson, who I believe is watching tonight. What up, Adam? And JoJo were facilitating together, and Harry was there, and he was like, Roger Kuhn, wow, you're here. It was like, oh, it's so nice to when folks sort of recognize you in that particular way. So thanks for giving Harry a shout out. And again, just from my heart to yours, Betty, thank you for not only this invitation tonight to be with you in this way. Truly, thank you for the gift of the Wheel of Consent. I believe that you have already changed the world because you have changed the way that so many of us think about how we can offer, how we can heal, how we can move closer to liberation. And you are just one step in that long journey for many of us. So thank you for everything that you have contributed so much. And I look forward to many, many more conversations with you over the rest of our lifetime together.
Mm,
So with all that being said, I'm going to start turning it over now to the Q&A from
okay.
our audience tonight. And the first question comes from, I believe it's Aubrey. Oh, this is a good one. So how do you help people navigate feelings of rejection when hearing a no?
Well, maybe it depends on what you mean by navigate. I'm not interested in helping people not feel what they feel. I'm really more interested in supporting people to feel what they feel so that it can shift and create whatever insights it's there to create. And it's totally natural to fear somebody saying no. Because in the first place, you're asking for it because you want it and you can be disappointed. And it's so easy for us to take it personally. Like, oh, they don't want a back rub, so therefore they don't like me and I'll never be welcome again. Yeah. And I think in playing the 3-minute game, what you find out is that, oh, I can say no. And it's respected. Oh my gosh, that might be a whole new thing to learn.
Yeah.
And I can hear a no, and the world doesn't end. Oh my gosh, what do I do with that? Yeah.
That's a great thing about limits up front when if you and I are going to play the game together, and I know your limits up front, you know my limits up front, it actually gives a ton of exploration there, because there's I'm not bracing for the no. I already know going in what that's going to be. And you know, there's something around you know, I took that question as like there's you know, how do I deal with the feelings of shame that emerge from the no? You know, that's really what I got from that. Great question, Aubrey. And you know, there's a way that if you ever go to like a Wheel of Consent workshop, an intro to Wheel of Consent workshop or something, you practice hearing the no. It's like part of the workshop. You just, you know, may I touch your hair for 3 minutes? No. Come on, you know, it's like you just get used to it. So it doesn't necessarily get easier to hear your no, though it does feel more settled in the system after a while. So thank you so much. I think
it helps you to not take it personally or catastrophize it.
Right. Yeah. And another question comes from Smith. How can we support clients tapping into what they, big caps here, really want? They say, I have the sense that my clients often want me to answer that for them, but I won't. So how can we support clients tapping into what they really want?
That's a great question. I'm glad to hear that you don't answer it for them, because that's really, I mean, in my work, which was experiential and surrogacy type work, it was really simple. I just kept asking them and be with them in their discomfort and normalize it. How would you like me to touch you? Oh, I don't know. I can't think of anything. That's okay. That happens all the time. No worries. We'll wait. So that they know they're not the only one. They know they're not broken. And once in a while, not very often, if it's really difficult for people, it helps to give like a multiple choice and help them narrow down. But mostly it's just asking them and normalizing it and waiting, and something will bubble up. Yeah.
We do a practice in the Wheel of Consent called the I Want game. And I was actually journaling just a couple of days ago, just all I just did I want. And it was phenomenal, the stuff that was coming up for me of just you know, like I had no problem writing about what I wanted. For 3 pages, I do like the morning pages, you know, sort of activity, and it was really interesting when and I think that's where the slowing down can come in really strongly, and really again using somatic awareness and somatic attunement. And I think one of the interesting things that I have found about my own aging process is I want different things now. in
Mhm.
my age. You know, I might want a
Mhm.
lower back massage, you know, in my late
Right.
40s. I didn't care about that in my early 20s. I didn't need it so much, though.
Yeah, yeah,
My body's different now, and
yeah.
my body responds to touch in different ways. And I have
Mhm.
noticed my own curiosity about I have been with my husband for 18 years already, and I'm noticing his body's changing too. And I
Mhm.
find myself really being curious about his body and what his aging process has been
Mhm.
like. And I've really used that in my in like our work as a couple. We play the 3-minute game sometimes
Mhm.
just for fun you know, around the house. And
Yay!
yes, exactly. It's really fun. And my want is really leaning into almost wonder, like this
Yeah,
curiosity that I can bring into
yeah,
myself, my body, my partner's body, and
yeah,
you know, other bodies, etc. So that's also like a way that I kind of think about it in the
yeah.
somatically around well, we also do this process called waking up the hands. We didn't talk about that tonight, but
Mhm.
I've been really loving this. I'm like using different objects. Today I just happened to have randomly, I don't know how this happened, Betty, but I had 2 tape dispensers on my desk today. I don't even know where they're from or why I have tape. I have no idea why I have tape on my desk today. But so that was the object that I grabbed, and I noticed
Yeah,
like the ridges of the tape dispenser felt so good on my
yeah.
fingers. And I was like, I've never noticed that. And I felt like I got this tingly sensation in my back. And I was like, I wonder what it would be like to have my husband use this tape dispenser on my back and my shoulders. And it's like, that's just like really like, can you be
Well, that sounds
creative?
great.
Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
part of the want is like being creative about it. And
Mhm.
sometimes we're using objects to play around with and
Mhm.
discover and to wake our
Mhm.
body up and wake other parts of our body up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Smith, for that.
I
I'm gonna
I will I will say this though too, that different people have different ways of getting the information into their cortex.
mm,
So sometimes for some people it will come as a visual image,
mm,
like I'll see a hand on my back. For some people it will come as a somatic imaging, like I can hear my shoulders talking to me,
mhm,
and for some people it's like just watching a movie.
mm,
For some people it's more of a verbal thing. So yeah, we're
mm,
just wired differently.
mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Smith. I'm going to take another question from this one comes from Kobe. They say, I participated in a conscious touch puja, platonic touch, where this concept of the wheel of consent was introduced. I felt some confusion when someone offered to do something to me that I wanted, and our facilitator questioned whether we were applying the concept correctly. I'm hoping to get some clarity around this experience.
Well, I cannot guarantee that the leader of your puja knew what they were talking about,
mm,
for one thing,
mhm,
because that's why we train facilitators so that they have it accurately.
mm,
And a lot of people get familiar with it or see it on YouTube and think they have it and try to introduce it, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. But it's not necessarily accurate.
mm,
So it depends on who they were, what they're trying to teach. They might be using some part of it to enhance what they're doing. Um, it, it, if you went to an actual wheel of consent workshop, I would assume that they were, but lots of people take bits of it and weave it in with what they're doing, and that's fine. And it's you may not have gotten the whole thing.
mm,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
So that is just a little reminder, folks, that Wheel of Consent workshops happen throughout the world.
Oh
Actually,
yeah,
now they're
yeah.
happening throughout the world. They happen in the Bay, and several times happen on the up in the Seattle area where
Mm-hmm.
you live in
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver, etc. So the best place to check for that would be is that on the Betty Martin or the School of Consent?
Schoolofconsent.org. Yeah.
Schoolofconsent.org will have a list of upcoming workshops that folks, if you're interested, I would highly recommend checking that out. And I hopefully, Kobe, you get some answers to those
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more questions that I want to get to, Betty. Do you have any recommendations for resources for sex educators, like conferences and courses?
Other than our own No, I don't.
Schoolofconsent.org is one.
Schoolofconsent.org.
Yeah.
And we do teach the 5-day training for practitioners. But you might just want to go take the 2 or 3-day workshop that's for regular people as a way to dip your toe in. And that may be enough for your curiosity, or you may find that you want the professional training. Yeah.
And as more facilitators get certified,
Yes.
they'll be bringing
Which will be happening soon.
That will be happening soon. I'm in the facilitation course at the moment. And, you know, my intention is partially to, you know, well, to continue introducing this to folks too, though, really then bringing the dynamics into more spaces, right? That, like the National Sex Ed Conference is happening in Philadelphia this year. That is, I believe, December 12th to the 17th. You may need to check those dates. Another conference is the annual ASEC conference, the American Association of Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. That one's happening in Vegas this year. I believe it's early June, maybe the 2nd through the something. I'm not quite sure those dates again, but I would check those conferences. CIIS conference, the Scientific Study for Sexuality. Those are sort of like the top 3 conferences that I'm aware of that where you may learn more about this topic as more and more people in the field begin to get facilitated to be able to teach this.
I haven't been very good about following those conferences, but I hope to next year.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Another question is, how do you help clients who are uncomfortable talking about sex or consent?
I just say, I wish I had an answer to that. Well, if you are, I don't know. The people who were coming to me for that.
Yeah.
So I was supporting them, and kind of in general, it's being willing to be with people in their discomfort. Because if I'm okay with your discomfort, you're going to learn how to be okay with your discomfort. You know, if you're a therapist working with a couple, they're not specifically talking about sex, but you know they need to be. That's a skill. I don't know. I mean, that would be part of what you're teaching, I reckon, if working with therapists.
And part of that, I think, is you know, one of the things that I always share in my clinical practice when I meet with clients for the very first time, and I remind them of this throughout our work, is that I really need to know about the particular behavior that you're doing. The therapeutic piece is how you feel about it. That's the work that I'm doing with you. I'm doing the feeling part with it, right? And the doing part may happen with someone else. Right? It may happen with a partner or partners, or it may happen with a surrogate or another means. We're talking about the feelings in therapy. We talk about the feelings associated with that, and any other, you know, maybe diagnosis, if that's a part of it as well. Because ultimately, you know, as a sex therapist, that is I always say to folks, that's like the fancy title that I use to kind of get your attention. The reality of my work is I'm a grief therapist. Folks are coming to me because they're grieving a part of their experience that they no longer have access to, or never had access to, or never knew how to access. So I always look at my work as grief work. And the joy of doing sex therapy through that sort of grief lens is that hopefully we get to that acceptance piece. And however someone's going to interpret that from their own particular perspective. So thank you for that question. We've got a few more.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. What books, articles, websites, authors would you recommend to people who want to learn more about consent theory?
My friend Marcia Baczynski co-wrote a book called Creating Consent Culture, which is it's basically how to create these little workshops, mostly for young people, also for adults. And so it has a lot of exercises in it, but in spite of it, it's really good just about consent. There's a couple of like graphic novel type books. Thalia Willis, maybe look that up on Amazon. But then go to the other bookstore to buy it. You can use Amazon to look it up, but then do your buying from the bookstore. Yeah, there's another one by a colleague of mine called Interrupting the Bystander, I think it's called, which is about how to support friends and acquaintances when there has been a breach of some kind. Yeah.
And then there's your own book, The Art of
And there's
Receiving
my
and
own book.
Giving.
Yeah. And Kitty Stryker has one about consent, whose name I'm forgetting the name of the book. Yeah. But you can also go to wheelofconsentbook.com, and there's a listing of other resources and books on there.
Wonderful. Wheelofconsentbook.com.
Yeah.
And part of that, just to share for the folks is, part of that also is sometimes self-discovery in your own writing process. If you're a writer, right, that's what I love about this work is that I have the person that created it in front of me. Betty made it up. Betty, the Wheel of Consent is made up, everyone.
It's made up.
Which is just a reminder that everything is made up, right?
Yes.
That if you have an idea, like, write about it, do the things, go to workshops, talk about it, go to conferences. That's what I did with my own work, my book, Cultural Liberation. You just start talking about it and naming it and name dropping it and all of those things. So that's one way that we can continue to build, because there needs to be more. We need more consent theory. We need more people writing and talking about consent. Question from Sarah. What if someone's want wasn't your original want, but excites you that they want it? Does it then become your want?
Say it again. Someone else wants something.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
But then I get excited and think, "Oh, that sounds fun."
Yes. Yeah. Does it now become your want?
Well, it may become something that you also want. But if you are if you are in the practice of the wheel of consent, it's for them because they asked for it. If you're, dancing in the kitchen or rolling around the bed, it doesn't really so much matter.
And it's okay to get, if I'm the one that's giving the gift, it's okay to receive pleasure from my giving. I can get pleasure from that. Right. Though it's not my want. The want is still the person that asked for it. Right. Will you, or that's an important distinction, that when we're giving, or when we're in depending on the quadrant that you're in, it can be a pleasurable experience. In whatever role that you're in. Even we can find pleasure in willing. There's pleasure, willing,
hell yeah.
And it can surprise us, right? I might be willing to do this, and wow, I had no idea that would be so pleasurable. So that is another example of how you can use that. A couple more questions. Are either of you teaching any other classes or participating in additional discussions later this year or next? Well, I'll go for myself. I'm so excited. I am teaching my very first workshop at Esalen. If folks don't know about Esalen, it's a really lovely retreat center in Big Sur, California. I'll be there the last weekend in January, based on my Cultural Liberation book, which does mention Betty's work in the book. So that's one way that you can come and see me that way. I will be speaking at the National Sex Ed Therapy Conference, the next National Sex Education Conference in Philadelphia. I think I speak on the 13th of December. And then if you're into a little rock and roll, you can come and see me at my final performance of the year. I'll be in New York City on December 21st at Don't Tell Mama. Last year, my show sold out, so I'm hoping that I will get to share some music, which is one of the ways in which I feel most in tune with my body and gives me so much pleasure to share, to give. But also, it's kind of a it's a will you be there to support me, and that's where I'm at. And How about you, Betty? Got
Yeah.
other things coming on?
And you may be doing some Wheel of Consent workshops later.
Yes, I'm in the process of facilitating, getting my facilitator certification, and my hope is that I will be next year after I get the certification. It goes through the end of the year, that I will be able to offer some workshops. Oh, I do have a really interesting workshop coming up with my friend Adam. We're doing a workshop called Decolonizing and Unsettling Consent, which it's a three-part workshop that starts in early 2025. And for more information about that, you can check out my Instagram, RKOUGHENR, for more information about how you can sign up for that workshop, Decolonizing and Unsettling Consent.
Ooh, I
yes.
want to, that sounds great.
Yeah, Adam Nicholson and myself are doing that.
Yeah,
so.
and that's online.
That's going to be an online thing. Yeah. So we'll have participants. And we have actually, hopefully we're going to have a couple of assistants that come from the wheel world as well. So it's one way that we're sort of taking that pecan pie, if you will.
Yes.
And evolving the ideology around what's possible with the wheel, and how we can talk about some of these more unsettling topics for folks. Yeah.
Oh, great. That's fabulous. I hope to join that one. For me, I'm also teaching at Esalen for the first time this year.
When are you going to be there?
March.
Oh, nice.
In March, yeah. And
are you doing a wheel workshop at Esalen?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Yay. Speaking of hot springs.
Yeah, exactly. I know how to do hot springs. And the school has at 7 or really 8, including me, trainers. So we have trainings going all over the world for 2025. And yeah, that's about that's about me for so far. Yeah. And like Roger said, we have trainings going all over the world.
Yeah. Another question has just come in around how can we explain the Wheel of Consent to new partners?
Ooh, well, it's possible to play the 3-minute game without describing where it came from, or without drawing it out. You don't need to draw it out. You just say, hey, you want to play a game? And you ask each other those 2 questions. That's the easy way. And as far as using it with your clients also, you don't need to teach them. You don't need to draw it out. You don't need to explain it. Those 2 questions, may I and will you? That's really kind of all you need. Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, bettymartin.org has a lot of free resources. I love sending folks to your website because it's like, yo, it's free, everybody. Betty has gifted the world with all of this amazing free stuff that you can, if you really wanted to dive into, there's tons of videos you can watch on your website, and the handouts. And so it's really, I would say to that person that asks, it's, how deep would you like to go? Because it's there. You could also bring a new partner to a workshop. You could come to a wheel workshop together. There's been partners in attendance to ones that I've attended to. So there's lots of ways that you can share and explain the Wheel of Consent to a new partner. So those were our questions that we had. I want to thank everybody that offered up a question, and I thought that in our final moments together, I would just again reiterate my gratitude for this moment, and my hope that whoever is a part of the CIIS world learns more about your work and starts to share it to the couples counseling students, to so that it becomes more foundational in the work that I used to teach at CIIS. I was a professor there for a couple of years, and I used to teach this couples counseling class before I knew the Wheel of Consent. And it's just like, oh gosh, if I could go back and redo that class, it would just be this, probably. I mean, you got to teach a little theory, though. It would mostly just be this, because I found it to be such a great modality. So whoever may be listening at CIIS, get Betty in there, or Make sure that the couples counseling class in particular, and the human sexuality classes are really aware of the Wheel of Consent and the 3-Minute Game and Harry Faddis and Betty Martin and the work that these people have gifted the rest of us with to really help us solve sometimes these really complex human feelings that come up with that big, beautiful topic that we call sex and sexuality. So, Dr. Betty Martin, what a joy. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you to everybody across the world who may have tuned in tonight. Thank you to everybody that is part of the Wheel of Consent community for bringing this work out into the world again and again. And for those of you that are at home watching live, thank you for being here with us. Any final words to close us out, Betty?
Well, it's great to see you again, and thank you for having me.
You are so welcome.
Yeah.
All right, folks, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I hope everybody stays safe, and remember, love is liberation. Peace.